Alright, so today we've got the rear cockpit carlings in. As you can see, they run from the back side of frame 2 all the way back to the transom. And I've got both sides in today. Now, what's interesting about these is just like the front cockpit carlings, which are still not glued and or faired, you can see they're sticking up here, but just like them, not only this frame is really close to vertical. However, because these carlings, let me see if I can get back here at an angle, you can see they kind of run on an angle. They're not dead parallel. So you have to cut this at the correct angle. On this one, it's 90 degrees, but the angle is about, I want to say 10 degrees or so. Back on this one, it's a little steeper. It's close to 12 degrees, angled the opposite direction, and it's angled 12 degrees this way. So you have two angles in that cut there, a compound cut, and I can't think of any better way to make that cut than that little bandsaw. It worked fantastic. And it's the same exact story on these carlings as far as, now I can kind of illustrate this. I've clamped these little pieces of block on here, and this is basically what I did to lay these out, with the exception of the block. I slid it farther up. It stuck up about 6 inches. But I drew my lines on here, clamped this block to it, sticking up, made sure it was perfectly vertical on both sides, and then I set that carling against it. And it hung over a couple inches each end. I made sure to cut it long, but it was sitting up on top, hanging over. Same with this one, about 6 inches tall. Leveled, and then I just transferred my angles. Basically, I put a straight edge on the side of the frame and just transferred the angle right up the side of the board, front and back. I also had to take my bevel square and figure out what this angle is here on both sides, which turned out to be slightly different. I think 9 degrees and 10, or 9 and 11, something like that. And I had to mark out that angle on the top of the carling on each side. So I took it over to my bandsaw and I cut it at the correct angles. And exactly like the front seat carlings, I had to cut 1/8 of an inch off, come back, slide it in, and it would drop in each time, because even though this is close to vertical, it's dang near 90 degrees. This one, the transom, is 12 degrees. So each time you cut that a little bit off, it drops a little bit deeper in the hole. Cut it again, a little bit deeper in the hole. So after making 4 or 5 cuts, just like the front cockpit carlings, I got to where it was really close to my 3-inch mark, where I wanted to be, and then finished it with the belt sander, taking, a 1/16 at a time and dropping it in, 1/16, dropping it in, until I hit my 3-inch mark down here, which is dead flush. Well, there's a bunch of crap in the way. Anyhow, it's dead flush with the frame back here. Once I got that, then I did the exact same thing I did on the front carlings. Again, I took this long piece of batten you can see laying here. It's 13/16 thick, about 1 inch wide or so. I don't know what it is, 10 feet long. And I set it alongside this, clamped it to the shear, clamped it to the front cockpit seat back, clamped it to frame 2, and then I had my faithful assistant push down on it until it touched the transom back here. And what that did was that, again, just like the front, it projected that arc across this piece, because this piece was 3/4 of an inch taller all the way down. I made it taller because I knew I had to cut that arc out of it. So anyhow, bending that batten projected the curve of the hull. And then the same thing, I just drew my line on the inside to that curve, took it back out, ran it through the bandsaw to follow that curve, and there we are, as you can see right here, just like the front cockpit carling. You can see the overhang where I still need to fair it and glue. These ones are glued in, but you can see the overhang here where I need to fair from this height down to the frame height over here. So just like I did on these with drawing my line, I'll draw my line on this all the way down, and then I'll fair it with my one of my planes, because that just makes quick, clean work of it. So these are glued in. Up here at the front, I have 2 1.5" silicon bronze screws that are screwed kind of on angle into that thing. So there's 2 up front here, 2 over here on that one. Now at the back it's trickier because at the moment I don't have any blocking for it. So I'm just strictly relying on the epoxy to hold it in place. Once this cures tomorrow, I'll pull all my clamps, take my blocking off, and then I will install blocking from the shear to here probably. I'll probably install some blocking up here, permanent blocking that will be glued in there. Possibly screwed from the face, although I didn't want to have screw holes in there. I'll probably do it anyhow and just famo wood them because it doesn't look bad by any means. But so I still have to provide blocking for both of these, and I'll probably put a support somewhere in here, and probably somewhere the rear seat back's going to be right in here, so I'll probably put blocking right in here somewhere where my step pad will be, where people are going to be stepping to get in and out. But making good progress. One thing I don't think I ever noted in any of my videos was a really neat trick. I guess I just kind of learned and took for granted that everybody else knew, but I didn't know it, and I guess it's worth sharing. If you notice, all of my blocking is wrapped in wax paper. You can see that one's wrapped in wax paper. This one up here, it's harder to tell, but it's wrapped in wax paper as well. Whenever I'm using temporary blocking like this, clamped on to hold a particular position, I wrap the blocking in wax paper because epoxy will not adhere. It cannot adhere to the wax paper. So when I'm done, I'll pull this clamp and this block will fall out. Because again, the epoxy can't adhere to it. If you were to temporarily clamp this blocking here without the wax paper, with all your epoxy in there, when you tightened it up and you got some epoxy squeeze out, you would glue your blocking to the back of the carling and to the frame, and then you'd have to bust it out and clean it up. Anyhow, it's doable without wax paper, but geez, you can get a roll at the dollar store, so use it. It's an incredibly handy tool. Any place you don't want the epoxy to adhere to, wrap it with wax paper. Tape it with wax paper, whatever the case. It works fantastic. So that's where we're at now. These carlings are roughly cut to shape. They are shaped to match the hull. Of course, they're not faired. They are attached at the front with screws and epoxied in. So after these cure, I think before I get to putting any fairing pressure on them, I'll go ahead and build some blocking in here, whether it's just a triangle gusset in this corner or chine to carling blocking. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it yet, but I'll stiffen those up and then I'll come and fair it after I've got some good strength back here. But we're making great progress. Right, so here is a quick update. As you can see, we now have the rear cockpit seat back support in, and again the front cockpit seat back support, which is faired at the angle to match the hull, as well as the rear cockpit seat back support are the exact same arch as frame 2. So I mean, you just take my plans, which are sitting over here. Here's frame 2. And they're that exact same arc. So 3 out of the 5 deck frames are all the same arc. So I got the seat back in at the moment. Same story. It is not faired off. You can see where we are even at this corner and sticking up at this corner. And I've drawn that line all the way across. So I'll have to fair that in an angle all the way across, just like I did with the front cockpit seat back support. You can see that angle now. 12 degrees the front cockpit seat back set at, and 12 degrees the rear cockpit seat back is set at. And yeah, there you can kind of see the angle of it. So again, it's 12 degrees from the floor height, or floor angle, not the keel. 2 different things. But that is in. There are 2 screws holding it in right now. Temporarily, it is not glued. So I went ahead and decided to do individual blocking back here on my rear cockpit carling. I was trying to figure out if I wanted to do a full shear to carling blocking or just one little piece, and I think this will be plenty adequate. There's 2 screws in it that hold it to the transom framework, and then there are 2 screws right here that screw the carling to it, as well as all of the epoxy all the way around it. So both sides are that way. You can probably see the 2 screws over there. I still have yet to do my blocking up in here, but I will. I think I'll probably do a carling to chine block on this one, probably this height, and maybe do like some sort of little half moon cutout or something to meet the bottom of this shear. I'm not sure, but I'll go ahead and screw it to the frame, and probably same thing, 2 screws in here into the end of it, just to give it some more strength. These members also strengthen up the transom and keep it from flexing. Now there will be 2 more. But they're not carling, they're actually part of the motor well. They'll be somewhere in here, and since, let me see if I can get back here. Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell, but anyhow, these carlings are set at an angle like that on the left side and angled the opposite direction on the right. So I think what I do, or what I'll do when I build my motor well, is the motor well side supports go from the transom here up to the seat back. So I think if these are sitting like this, I think I'll swap the angle like that to help triangulate some of that force and transfer some of the torque on that transom to the rear seat back. And I'm going to build blocking in behind here from the seat back to the carling on both sides. And when I do my motor well, I'll do blocking probably in between them, and blocking to the transom and motor well, and blocking from the motor well to the seat back, to try to strengthen this whole area up in here. But making good progress. You can probably see now that I have faired these carlings off at an angle. Still have to fair the seat back support all the way across. But these are now faired at an angle to match in with everything. I still have not done the front cockpit carlings. You can see I still need to fair them off. They're still flush here, sticking up here. But I did, however, draw my lines on them. Now, something I did different. If you look here, you can see this was my original height. And after doing a whole bunch of pre-planning and measurements, I just didn't think that this, which was a little over 2.5 inches tall, I didn't think that was going to give me enough space in here to hide the things I needed to underneath it. So I took these back out, and I took my jack plane and made sure this was a nice perfect flat line, and I ripped 2 more 1-inch pieces of the same African mahogany and lined them up, drilled in 4 places down the sides, and glued epoxy and screwed that extra 1-inch spacer to the bottom of them, and ran it up underneath the frame, front and back. You can see it. Hopefully you can see it back here. You might be able to see it there now. Where it used to be flush with the frame right here, it runs underneath it now, front and back. And you can see that line right now where I've joined the 2 together. But after I get it sanded out and covered in epoxy, it should be very, very hard, if not impossible to see. But the main reason I did that was because there's some things I want to put in this space. One of those would be speakers for a stereo on the boat, and I don't want them to be visible. So after I had gone to a couple of websites and picked out the speakers I wanted to use, with the old height, it would have only left me a 1/4 inch space between the magnet and this deck. So now adding this extra inch on here, you know, it gives me an 1.25 inches to play with, a lot more room underneath these carlings. So I can get my speaker in here along with my wiring to try to keep everything hidden. When you look at this boat, I don't want anything really, really modern to stick out at you. You know, I want to have a nice stereo, and I want it to sound fantastic, but I don't want you to see, you know, speakers hanging down or speaker pods mounted up in here. I don't want to see any of that. I want it to look as vintage as possible. So adding that extra inch on here would allow me to do that. The rear carlings are 3-inch, a little bit over 3-inch wide, so they're fine. They would clear great. But the front carlings I molded or cut to about 2-inch wide, and it just wasn't quite enough to do it. My steering cable will have to go in there. So I added that extra little 1-inch section along the bottom. And I still have some cleanup sand work to do and a little bit of epoxy filler work to do up underneath here, but I think it turned out pretty dang good. So we're making good progress, chugging along. I think the next thing to do will be to fair these carlings, get those faired off to match the shape of the hull, or the curve of the hull, curve of the top deck of the boat. Then I'll have to fair this seat back support, just like I did the front cockpit seat back support, get that faired. And then I got to decide, am I going to start on my motor well, or am I going to start on my flooring, the sole of the boat. So I'm not sure which direction I'm going to go just quite yet, but making great progress. Look at that thing. Beautiful. All right, so today we've got our spots for the sole, or the planked floor, to land on. Originally I was going to screw individual little blocks right where the planks would be, but after talking to a few fellows on the forum, on the Glen-l website, you know, people that did that, they actually recommended if they were going to build another boat, they wouldn't have done it that way. They would have just used one solid piece all the way across. So I took that advice from more experienced boat builders than I, and I decided to do what they suggested. So again, these are they're 1-inch thick, and they span from just shy of the chine on each side all the way across. 7 screws in each one that hold it to it. They're not epoxied yet; they're just all fit up. But I got this side done. This is frame 4, the dashboard, driver cockpit. So I got both sides of that done, and then back here, you can see I've got frame 4, the rear cockpit dashboard would be up above it, but I've got that one on. I haven't done the back side over here yet. There'll be another one. It'll be on this side. Just ran out of material. So I got 3 of the 5 done. I'll have to put one back here, and I'll have to put one up here underneath the floor timber at frame 5.5. And I made this little block, and this step is cut 13/16 deep. So when I was setting this up, I could stick it on top of my frame and push down until it touched my floor support, and that's the correct depth, so that when the floor gets installed here, it will be flush with the frame. I know this is a bad angle, but anyhow. So this height keeps it 13/16 deep, keeps it so that my floorboards will be flush with the top of the frame. So I got those done today, and I've also glued in, but I haven't faired it yet, the rear cockpit seat back. So I've drawn my line where I need to get it faired off, but the glue's hard up, so I can get that faired. I can start putting my blocking in behind on each side, my blocking up here on this carling. I still haven't done that. My blocking for the front cockpit carling, still have to do that. Making good progress. All right, so this is something I wanted to talk about, again, because I'm not a very experienced woodworker, so, you know, these are things that I learn along the way. I noticed my table saw, while it cut good, it had always produced a little bit of crown in the cut. It was very minute, but if we take a straight edge, this is one that I ran through my table saw. We put this straight edge on top of here. You can see the light under both sides of it. It's got a crown in the middle. It's very slight, and I've just become used to it. So, you know, whenever I rip something like this, I'll make a pass or two with my plane, and it's perfectly flat. And, you know, it's an extra step I have to do, but I just assumed that because, oh, geez, now I got to show you my mess. I just assumed because, you know, this is a homemade saw that you would get some of that. That was just an assumption because I'm not a woodworker. But today I thought, you know what? Because this saw was given to me, the skill saw, it had a blade that was on it, and I've just been using it the entire time. I have no idea, you know, how much time is on this blade, or it still feels pretty sharp. The little carbide teeth on it feel pretty sharp. But anyhow, I thought, you know, I'll just run down and I'll pick up another blade. So the blade I happen to pick up is a DeWalt 24 tooth carbide tip construction blade. I didn't actually want this DeWalt blade. It just happened to be the only one they had in stock, so I picked it up. I thought, well, we'll give it a try. So I put that on the saw, as you can see, sticking up, and I ran a piece of wood through there. So take a look at the finish difference. Hopefully it'll focus here. Yeah, it doesn't want to focus. Let me try it again. Huh. Yeah, it doesn't want to focus at all. Well, I'm sorry about this. But anyhow, needless to say, I mean, you can see the difference in the two cuts. This one here is like perfect. There's no light underneath it, just a perfectly flat cut. Whereas this one has a crown all the way down it. And I can't explain why that crown would happen in the cut. I can't explain it other than it had something to do with the blade. Whether, even though the blade feels sharp, you know, it must not have been sharp enough to do the job, or maybe it was the wrong tooth count for ripping. I have no idea. I couldn't tell you what it is. But all I can say is this new DeWalt blade, and I'm not the biggest DeWalt fan, but the new DeWalt blade just blows it out of the water. You can see how much smoother of a cut it is compared to this one. And I'm sorry my camera's just not wanting to cooperate with the focus here, but needless to say, it is a substantially better cut than the old blade. So anyhow, I did this because I'm getting ready to start on ripping my floorboards, and I want them to be a perfect straight line. And I didn't want to have to fool with having to hand plane the edges of each one of my floorboards. So I thought, well, I'll try this and see if it works, and it absolutely did. That was night and day difference. It was definitely the blade. Now this thing cuts, I mean, it cuts better than it ever has, and it cut pretty good to begin with, you know, minus the little crown that was in it. Now the crown is non-existent. Just beautiful. Perfect cut. Mo better. And check out my mess. Okay, I finally got my camera to focus now. You can see that the difference in the cut quality between the old blade and the new blade. I mean, that was definitely my problem. This one over here looks like you cut it with a chainsaw. Huh, well, what do you know? I'm getting better at this woodworking stuff every day. Well, apparently I need to buy some more shop light bulbs. Sorry about the poor lighting tonight. In my never-ending quest of using every single scrap of mahogany I possibly can, if it's still of useful size, I have yet another scarf joint. And this is going to be another one of the floor supports to go on the transom side of frame 2 that I still haven't finished. So I took a couple of chunks and ran them through the saw to get them to the correct size and scarf joined them. So I now have a long enough piece. I didn't have a piece long enough to do that with. So that's what I worked on tonight. Yes, my garage is still a gigantic mess. Making great progress. Alright, took a few minutes to clean the shop. As you can see, I can finally be proud to put it on YouTube again. Still have a burnout light. I'm working on that. And where we're at the moment, as you can see now, we now have this floor support in for frame 2, the transom side of frame 2. Again, spans all the way across, 7 screws. And none of these, again, are glued in. They're just bolted on. So now we have 4 of the 5 done. I still have to do the one up there under the frame 5.5 floor timber. So I'll get that one done and on, and then I'll start putting some center supports in here. Front and back, same back here, one back here, and a center support or 2. And then I can start getting the floor put in. So we're making great progress. All right, well, it's officially November 1st, 2015. For the month of October 2015, we went up 21.75 hours, so it was a pretty good month. Let's see, we put 7 3/4 hours into the floor, and the rest of that time, 14 and some change, went on to some more deck framing. So for this month, we went up a whopping $11.99, and that was just for the saw blade that I bought for my homemade table saw. So I like months like this where you go up good hours and you don't have to invest a lot of money. That's kind of nice. It's a nice change. So that brings us up to 313.25 hours total into the zip build. So we're doing good now. We're well into the 300-hour range. And our $11.99 brings us up to $3,118.39 invested. So let's see where we are. So what we've done in the last few days of last month is I have faired this off now at the correct angle. And you might still be able to pick up little hints of my pencil and possibly see some of the pencil line here. So that's what I drew all the way across, so I knew how much to fair it at. So I ended up with a nice straight line from line to line, and the correct bevel all the way across. So that's done. You can see I've got a pile of shavings sitting everywhere. Got that done. We now have all of my floor supports on both sides of frame 2 glued in place now. That was something I did earlier yesterday. And also both floor supports on frame 4 are glued in place. So they're official. I still have yet to build the one up here on frame 5.5. That'll be some of the next things I do, sorry. Because I liked my blocking that I made here to support the rear front cockpit seat back. I love those little blocks. I don't know why. I decided to start using that style in other places. So as you can see here, the carling, I've got one from the carling to the front cockpit seat back. I also have another one up here from the carling to frame 4. And I have one over here, so there's one on each side of the front cockpit seat back, and I did the same on that side over there. So now this carling has 2 screws in here, 2 screws in here, for a total of 4 at each end. So each carling has 8 screws in it. It's probably overkill, but I don't have to worry about it being stout. It's very stout now. So just like I talked about throughout this video here and there about carling and blocking in places. So the front carling, they're all done with the blocking. Everything's screwed and glued and official and done. I now have to do blocking still in here for my rear cockpit carlings on both sides, as well as blocking behind the rear seat back to rear cockpit carling, blocking in there. I still have to do some sort of supports here and here on both sides and do the motor well. But I think for the time being, I'll probably continue on my floor. I've got to start building some cross supports in here in the rear cockpit floorboard area, and same in the front cockpit floorboard area. I'll have to build some supports in here. And once I get those supports made, then I can start laying my mahogany planks down for the floor. So we're making great progress. There's always something to do on it now, which is great. I'm at a point in the build where I can, you know, if I reach a spot where I have to stop on the floorboards, well, I can start on the motor well, or I can start on carling blocking, or, you know, adding supports from carling to shear. There's so much work that can be done all the time now, so it's fantastic. Making great progress. Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, rate, and comment, and we'll see you on the next update of Building the Zip.